Welcome to Nuke's awesome guide on how to organize and run a tournament. Now we're going to look at tournament.com specifically. That's tournament with two O's. I didn't come up with the name, don't blame me. But there's many tournament management systems out there. You've got things like Challenge, Battlefy, Start.gg, probably many others. But we're going to be focused on tournament.com. And there's two main views when you look at tournament. There's the organizer view and there's also the participant view. So this is a public page for participants to go in and see their matches, who they're versing, who creates the lobby, things like that. It can be useful games like League of Legends. Tournament has a system where it'll generate tournament codes so participants can come in and basically click on their match and get the tournament code, join into the lobby and start the match. That way they don't need to create a custom game themselves. Tournament sets that up for them. Anyway, we're mainly focused on the organization of the tournament rather than the actual participant view. So there's 5 main sections we want to look at when we're organizing a tournament or setting it up to pretty much go. The 5 sections are settings, structure, participants, placement, and matches. So let's start with settings. So the main thing we want to make sure in the general settings that we have set up is the maximum number of participants that are entering this tournament. In this example, I'm setting up a Rocket League 3v3 tournament and I'm going to say there's a maximum of 8 teams. The reason this is important is we want to just make sure that we don't go past our cap, and it just means Tournament knows exactly how many teams are going to be so that when we're registering people or adding participants, we don't go past that maximum. So if that's a free-for-all, that would be the same, but it would just be the maximum number of players rather than the maximum number of teams. So I'll just click update there. Once we've made sure all the general settings are correct, that's good. The next part we just want to do is the match settings. So when we're reporting results, it's important that Challenge knows how to deal with those results. Is it going to be best of 1, best of 3? Is it going to be score based or is it result based? In general, it's easier just to leave it as a fixed game or a single game when you're entering results. But if you wanted to, you could set up for Rocket League, for example, is we could say it's a best of 3 and we're going to enter scores. The reason why I don't recommend this approach for something like Rocket League is because you would have to basically know the score of every game that's played and get the players to report all that information. In general, for something like a bracket where we're not doing a round robin or something like that, we don't need to know the exact scores, so it's easier to just report the result rather than the score. But anyway, if you did want to report the score, if you're doing something like a round robin, or you need to make sure that when you're placing participants in the final results, if you need to determine something beyond their match wins, then you may want to record their scores as well. So in our example, we'll just keep it as a single game and we're going to do it result based. So for Rocket League, we're just going to ask the players to report it as something like 2-1, 2-0 or something like that. So I'll update that. So that's the general settings done. We've set the maximum number of teams in our example and we've told Tournament how we're going to report the results, because we're going to report the results, not the players. Next thing we want to do is set up the structure. Now, when you're setting up the structure for the tournament, you may have something like a multi-stage tournament where you do group stages followed by a final stage. So Tournament allows you to set up those multiple stages if you wanted to do that. In our example, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to do a single stage tournament, which will be single elimination in this example. So we're just going to create the stage here. And in setting up that stage, we need to decide, is it a team-based tournament or is it a free-for-all? So in the example, like I said, we're going to do a single elimination. So we're just going to go into dual or team-based and pick single elimination. This number is automatically generated. You can keep that the same, but that tells you if you had multiple stages, what order you want to do each stage in. So this will be the first stage. Because we only have one stage, it doesn't really matter too much. And I'm going to call it bracket. If we had different stages, you may want to name each stage appropriately, like group stages and finals or something like that. This number is the number of teams that are going to enter into this bracket. Because there's a single stage, will be equal to the number of teams in the tournament. But if you had something like a final stage, maybe you've reduced down to 2 or 4 teams by this point, and that's the number of teams that would be entering into that stage. So we'll leave that as 8. If we had a 3rd and 4th place finish, we may want to set this to yes to basically say we've got prizing down to 4th place. Advanced, you can keep that the same. We don't need to change this. Placement, if we wanted to allow the participants to enter the results, you could allow that. Generally, we don't do that. We get them to the participants to report the scores to us, and then we would basically just enter the results. Now for the format, because we've already entered the default match results or the match setting results, we don't need to set it here. But if we hadn't done that step, then you'd probably want to set it here. So we're just going to inherit the format from the general match settings. So we create that. So at this point, if we went to the public page, we could at least now see we've got our bracket generated, but we haven't added any players into the bracket yet. So the next step we are going to do is go to participants. Now, if you're doing a registration system, you could allow the players to basically register for the tournament. And then if you wanted to, you could verify those before they were added as participants into the bracket. But based on our system here, because we're just doing this as a test, I'm going to automatically fill the participants. So pretend that they've registered for the tournament. If you wanted to, you can manually add them if people didn't register, or you just wanted to have control over that. So you can see on this example, we've got 3 players on each team. We've got unnamed 1 to unnamed 8, which is our 8 teams or 8 participants that are entering this tournament. You'd want to, during the briefing, just make sure that you've got all the teams present or all the participants present, just to make sure that this is correct and we can basically generate the bracket from it. So once we've done that, we've added the participants. They haven't been added to the bracket yet because we said that we wanted to manually place participants into the bracket. So we need to now go to placement, and specifically we want to go to the single elimination bracket to add the players into this stage, into this bracket. So seeding or placement, you may have qualifiers or certain reasons why you may want to seed players in a certain order. For a lot of the tournaments we run, we just generally add them. So we just select the checkbox up here to select all the participants, add them to the bracket. We may click the randomize button a few times. Because we generally don't have a lot of information about participants before running this tournament, we don't generally seed them. But if we wanted to make sure 1 was versing 2, or, we can change the order here manually if we wanted to do that as well. So once I click save, now the participants have been added to the bracket, so I can look on the public page and should see that the bracket has been updated. It's just thinking about it. There we go. So the participants have now been added to the bracket. So once you've got to this stage where we've placed participants into the bracket, matches can now start. So they would be able to start creating their lobbies and starting their matches, and we would just then be waiting for the results. So the players should be informed, the bracket is now live and you can start your matches. So that's all for the organization or setting up the bracket. The next part we need to do is basically just enter the results. So when we go to results, or so the matches section here, we click on our bracket and we just click the match result we want to enter. And in our example, all we need to do is basically say who won. If we wanted to, we could report the score, but like I said, we were doing it basically just on the match result, so we didn't care too much on the score itself. So I'm just going to click who won. If we have a situation where someone forfeited, you can basically say that as well. If one team forfeited, you can just click that button there as well. So I'm going to click update and back, and we should be able to see if I refresh this even on the public page. If we give it a second, it's going to eventually report that score. So there we go. We can see that unnamed 2 won that one. If we happen to make a mistake there, we can always go back and basically cancel that result. So you'll see there's an X next to the result here. So if I do that and click update, that'll basically undo that result. And we could then re-enter the result to say maybe unnamed 1 instead of unnamed 2. So I could do that and update the result that way. So challenge does allow you to go back and update results if you make any mistake. But you basically go through and enter these results. So whoever wins each time, you can basically enter that. And you can see as I'm going through, that's just updating the bracket. So yeah, there's not much more to report. I'll just quickly go through just for the sake of completeness here. So we can see we're entering the results. I'm not going to enter a draw. That would be not very good. Speed running a tournament. And then this is the grand final. So that should be the final one here. And this is the playoff match for third and fourth position. So I've entered the result there. So that's all the matches reported. So if I do that, we should basically see we've got the overall winner here. So unnamed 1 was the overall winner for the tournament. So that's pretty much done. If you wanted to, you can go into the final standing and make sure that you pick who was the overall winner and save that. But there we go. Final match results have been entered. So that should be pretty much it if we were to go to the overview. So we should be able to see now that it's finished. So the tournament has been complete and we can see all the match results have been reported. So that's the general overview on how you organize and run a tournament in Toornament.com. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to Nuke, myself, and I can answer them. Cheers.